And the possibilities with AI are just absolutely incredible. So I'm sure I can feel the excitement in the room. I, for one, am obsessed with my Meta AI app. I just moved from Sydney to London at the start of February, and I'm planning all my amazing European adventures, and I'm in there planning out my itinerary. So there's just so many different opportunities for us to lean into this space. I now like to formally welcome onto the stage Shabazz, CEO of Venture Beyond. He's going to take us through AI-powered creative strategy, which is going to be super exciting. As CEO of Venture Beyond, an e-com growth agency that I've got the pleasure of working with every single day, whose focus is scaling e-com brands through paid social creative production and CRO. Since 2020, Shabazz has transformed a modest team of 4 to 10 times that, now a team of 40, into an absolute powerhouse of super wizards. And they certainly are up there at their offices with all of the different activations they have around their office, headquartered in the UK. Under his leadership, a beauty brand soared from 900K to 65 million in annual revenue. Just absolutely incredible work there. And a Kickstarter brand to 8 figures in revenue, and several other brands have been propelled to achieve 7 and 8 figures. So we're in good hands with you today to learn all about how we can leverage AI to build our own creative strategies. I'd like to welcome you up on stage.
Thank you. AI-generated advertising. Thank you everyone again for coming. Really pleasure to be here, and just excited that so many people turned up. I think some of you might have seen me in the ads where there's like a transformation of my face turning into 4 other faces. I know the guys in the office had a bit of a laugh, making me into like about 10 or 15 different advertisers, some that I couldn't approve because they're a little bit too sketchy, but we got some through in the end. So how does this clicker work? There we go. There. Yeah, so why am I here? What's the main reason I'm here? Right. The thing that kind of keeps me up at night, or what I'm thinking about first thing in the morning nowadays, is I go on my feed and I see a bunch of different things about AI, and I'm always thinking, okay, how do I make sure that I don't get replaced? Because I think it's one thing that people are thinking about, but it's not a very savory conversation to bring up. Like, okay, can AI and will AI replace jobs? I believe it will replace some jobs, and I think it's important that we're the ones who don't get replaced, but the people who leverage AI. And that's why I put this together. And that's why I spoke to Alex at Meta and said, hey, we need to talk about this. We need to get everybody in the room and start discussing this. So I'm very keen on leveraging it for what it's powerful for. And that's one of the things I'm going to be talking about today. So yeah, Alex recognized that we've been scaling a lot of campaigns using AI, generated advertising. So that's another reason we're here. And I just want to share what we've been up to. And yeah, just want to meet and build connections with you guys in the room. So I just want to get a bit of a feel for who's in the room today. I did have a look at the list, but just a quick show of hands. Who here is from an actual e-commerce brand? Okay, quite a few people. And who's from an agency, marketing or otherwise? Okay, who's from tech or software? Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's a fairly even split between. I think one thing I've noticed is there's a big shift from people doing marketing to going into tech. We've certainly been making that move. And I think as AI emerges, there's definitely a bit of a cross between marketing and tech. And I think some of the best tech tools within the AI space are going to be born from the marketing sector. I truly believe that. I think that people who build software who are from a software background but not from a marketing background sometimes miss the mark. And I've spoken to a few founders who've done that, and it's not quite the right tool, right? Whereas people who've got a problem, they solve it, and they've kind of been like, okay, I could turn this into a process and a software. Those are the best tools that I've been seeing. But of the people who are doing software, who's come from a marketing background? Yeah, there's a few. There's a few here. Yeah, I saw that hand going up straight away. That guy is interesting. I'm going to talk about him later. Cool. So what am I going to cover today? So creative testing on Meta. Who here is running ads on Facebook? I hope everybody's running ads on Facebook. Okay, cool. So everyone's got a bit of a testing procedure, I presume. So everyone is running ads, testing them, going again, running different ads, right? So I'm going to be talking about our process of sequential creative testing. So how do we turn this into a repeatable process that allows us to produce 1,000+ ads a month for a brand if needed? Why you need a lot of ads to scale? Having volume is important. What the team is in the process behind actually getting that to happen, and how to make the process go faster. This is a problem I think about every single day. How can I make this speed up every stage of the process? And I'm going to walk you through our process and explain what I'm doing to amplify each section. And then finally, kind of within that whole framework of creative testing and creative strategy, I'm going to talk about the different parts where you can apply AI. Now, the people who are claiming that you can use AI to make an ad from start to end and launch it, there's very specific use cases where you can do that, but I don't think we're at the point right now, at least in 2025, where that's entirely possible. So I think all of our jobs are safe for now, but we want to make sure that we're at the front of understanding what's possible. I think as time progresses, more things will be. Who's tested VO3 here? I want to know. Oh, that's okay. Fair shot of people, right? And it's an impressive tool. Right? I think it was a game-changing, step-changing moment for me where I was like, okay, this looks real. And I just made some funny scripts about my friends. I was just trolling them, sent them to them on WhatsApp, and they thought it was real because they hadn't come across VO3. And that's the thing that kind of blew my mind. I was like, hang on a second, like nobody's going to know the difference between like what's real and not real anymore. And I think we've switched that when VO3 got released. And that's like the worst version that will ever exist. The next version is going to be better and better and better. So who am I? I think I've already been introduced, but we run a performance marketing agency. I'm very focused on getting performance by all means necessary. We run brands that are spending between 100K a month and 3 million a month on Meta. I think one of the key differences between us and why we can empathize with brands is we spend our own money on ads as well. So we work as an affiliate, which means we get paid per sale. So a brand will come to us and say, hey, here's a fixed amount, £300 every time you can bring us a customer, and we'll go and spend our own money. So, I mean, last month we spent 600K on one particular brand. And, I feel that if it doesn't work, basically, if I don't get that to work, like my family's not eating, right? So I've got to make sure that I'm there in the office grinding, getting this process to work and tick, right? And I think that's one of the key differences because we just live and breathe this every single day. And as Alex mentioned, we do creative production, media buying, CRO. Some of the brands we work with, Delsey, Benetton, Jeep, Naked and Thriving is a particular brand that was mentioned, which we scaled from 1 million to, they actually did 75 million last year. And they got themselves into the Meta disruptor category, which is a special group. And to start the point, so more ads definitely equals more scale. Now, there's a bit of difference between causation and correlation here, because it's not that more ads necessarily equals more scale. What it actually is, there's a step in between. More ads equals more learnings equals more scale. The more ads you test, the more things you can learn about what's resonating with different audiences, the more you're going to get scale out of your account, right? And this is a particular brand that we worked with, and you'll notice that the graph in purple is the amount that we spent, and the graph in pink is the amount of ads we launched, and then a similar kind of thing on the right-hand side. But you'll see how basically they track each other, right? So as we launch more ads, we're not spending more money, and we're spending more money because the campaigns are more profitable. We're very much in the performance marketing space, which means we only spend when it's working, when it's driving conversions. If it's not driving conversions, we slow spend down. So for me, whenever I've done this kind of an analysis on a brand, I've always seen that basically more volume is a better thing. So for smaller brands, we might produce 50 ads a month. For a larger brand, we might get up to 1,000 plus ads per month, right? So I'm very keen to see what AI does with this whole process, because we know the cost of ad production can be expensive, especially if you're doing video production and things like that. So AI can definitely help bring down these costs and allow you to test a lot quicker. That particular brand, just a key result we got, I guess, from testing a lot. We spent 4 million in a particular month, and we generated 6.3 in revenue. I can tell you that was all profitable on first order as well. We weren't acquiring at a loss or anything like that. Key point for me here is ads don't last forever, right? So good ads will have a certain life cycle. So generally speaking, you'll see that when an ad is launched, by the next month, it's taking up a slightly higher percentage of the ad account's total spend. And then by month 3, month 4, it's just decaying, right? So the whole principle here is you can't just make an ad and expect it to win, or make one campaign and expect it to win, right? You've got to continuously be producing ads, which means you need a process to put out net new creative every single month, right? You can't just have a seasonal campaign twice a year, 3 times a year, do a shoot, expect it to continue yielding. That's just not how it works in direct response and how it works in performance marketing. So to get continuous performance, you've got to keep riding these waves and keep launching new ads every single month. So if I was to break it down into a very simple, oversimplified formula, let's say, so revenue growth is ad quality times by ad quantity, right? So I've talked about quantity, you need to produce more. Quality is down to how we measure it is ads that have spent more than £1,000 divided by number of ads launched. And I can tell you now, a pretty standard percentage for us is about 5 to 10%. So that means only 5 to 10% of ads actually perform. The rest of them don't spend anything and don't get any eyeballs on them, right? And that kind of changes your thought process around trying to perfect every single creative. The whole idea is you've got to be a bit quick and dirty. You've got to test things quick, even if they're slightly off brand, they don't quite meet them. You can always improve it later, right? And I think that's one thing that brands are always a bit precious about is keeping their brand image intact. What they don't realize is 90% of their ads, which they spend loads of time and money testing, never actually get anywhere, right? So like, why even do that? Just test quick and improve later. That's definitely our ethos. Ad quantity, simply number of team members you have times by the amount of ads they can produce, right? And with AI and the use of AI, and everybody in our office is using it every single day, the number of ads that people can produce is definitely increasing, every single week. So question is, I get asked this all the time by brands, like how many ads should we produce? So this is just a Mid-Journey picture. By the way, since I discovered Mid-Journey, I just went crazy on like generating stuff and like I just make mad stuff. We've actually got a shared channel. There's like you can make a workspace between a company, right? And like I've got a channel, and I really hope people aren't looking in there what I'm generating because it's kind of a bit wild. But anyway, so I started generating stuff. Who uses Mid-Journey here? Yeah, a lot of people. Okay, I'm good. I'm glad to see that people in the room are people actively using AI because I was a bit afraid that there'd be people who are just trying to learn what it is for the first time or something. So that's really good. So yeah, how many ads should you produce? Right, it's a magic question I get asked because ultimately, your CFO or your CMO, whoever's controlling the budget, is going to ask you, okay, how much money do you need to make ads? Right, so that's the key question that gets asked. For me, I'll relay this point with an example. So this particular brand was spending $2 million a month on Meta. To get to the point of spending $2 million a month, we had to have 35. We did the person who pulled the data from our system is at the back there. 35,000 raw images and videos were in our system, so it's in our DAMs, so in Frame.io is what we use. From that, we made 5,000 ads, and that was split into roughly half-half between new concepts and iterations. Iterations is where we get an existing ad and we improve it. A new concept is where we're designing something brand new for the first time, right? And you can imagine if you're too slow with creative production, if you're too precious about getting every single small detail right, you just can't produce this volume. You physically don't have enough resource. Your team is not going to be patient enough. Production cost is too high. It just won't get done. Key point for me here as well is like it's not just about producing more of the same. You have to have diversity, right? And one thing you'll notice about this particular image, I've got another one after to compare, is the images all look kind of the same. And I watched a video online, somebody mentioned doing the squint test. So if you squint at this image and you look at it, everything looks kind of the same. It's all got that green color palette. The text is all kind of similar. They're all statics. They've all got a bottle in there, right? What you want to do is you actually want to have, when you do the squint test, you want everything to look kind of different. So your concepts want to be different. You want to have videos, you want to have images, you want to have creators, you want to have statics, you want to have close-ups of products. And by doing this, you appeal to like a very wide range within your audience, right? And that's not just the types of people. It's not just the different demographics, but it's also the stages of the funnel that they're at. So somebody who's top of funnel is probably going to be more driven by a video, a content creator video. Somebody who's more bottom of funnel is going to be more driven by an offer, a static, some details around the products. So you need to cover the full kind of like depth and breadth of advertising to make sure you cover everything and get scale. So it is about producing more ads, but you also have to produce more diverse ads, right? So you can't just produce more of the same. More Mid-Journey stuff. I did this ages ago. I think it's improved since now. I'm going to read back what I wrote a year ago. The universe will drop the perfect ad into my ad account when you... Okay, no. The universe will drop the perfect ad into my ad account when you're graced with a creative genius that only I can understand. I think some creative people are a bit wacky, right? We all are a bit wacky in a certain way. And I think to get creative, you've got to go into that like dark side of your humanness, and you've got to like reach out to it, touch it, and be like, okay, I'm going to go do this thing. And for me, it requires being in a dark room on my own. Like I think other people have different setups where they get creative. Everybody's got a way of being creative, right? For me, I literally have a tent in the office. Like people in the office know where I sit, and I've like boarded off the corner, and I've literally put a tent over the top of my desk. I can send a picture to anyone afterwards if they want to see it, or check my LinkedIn. There's probably a post about it, and that's where I get like really focused on just thinking, right? And as things have progressed, I get paid to think more than to do, and I think as creatives, the more the AI kind of comes up and allows us to do the doing. It enables humans to do more of the thinking and less of the doing. And I think it's just having that space in your life to lock yourself away, get creative, and do more of the thinking. And I think that's where creative genius is going to come through with AI, which I'm going to cover in a bit. But I think the key point I was making here originally was you can't just assume that because you're some creative genius that everything is going to work. You've got to be systematic about this. Yes, there's space for creativity, but you have to do repeated creativity, right, which takes a process. All the top brands that I've observed who are doing 9 figures plus in revenue, they work with multiple different agencies, in-house team. They've got lots of heads thinking about the problem, right, and they're continuously pushing and producing every single month. And that is a key difference with D2C brands who are making it and not making it. They've got a good product, a good offer, and good creative. And honestly, that's pretty much what it comes down to. You build the social proof around it, and bang, you've got a 9-figure brand, right? That's ultimately what it comes down to. So how are we systematic about the process? So I like to split it down into pretty much 6 stages. The first stage for me is the most important, is research. So you've got to really, really, really truly get to know your customer. And this is where we start capturing ideas. We then internally present them, we discuss them, we challenge each other. We figure out which one is going to be the best one to push forward based on, we use some kind of RICE scoring. Who's heard of RICE method for scoring stuff? A couple of people, okay. So it's like, how much confidence do I have in this idea? How much impact is it going to have? And how much effort is it going to take, right? And the best thing you can do is low effort, high impact. So you always want to start there and you want to move forward. And that's how we prioritize ideas. So you move from the research stage to then briefing. So who here writes briefs for ads? Okay, there's a good, probably third or so of the room. Who here hates writing the brief? It sucks, right? It's like one of the most boring parts of the task, right? Especially when you wrote something down and you really hope that the team understood it and they just didn't get it. It's like frustration in that process. Brief writing for us is writing a brief which can include a storyboard, if it's a video, a layout, if it's an image. It goes through some compliance if there's copywriting involved, and then we have some automatic naming conventions around that. Then to production, the fun stuff, right, where we actually make ads. So that's getting the raw assets from content creators, from AI now, from stock images, stock videos, product photography, and then turning it into something that's a meaningful ad. Getting things through approval. Now, this is probably the biggest bane in my life and where the process slows down the most. And I can see a few smiles in the room, so I know other people struggle with this. We have internal approval in our own team, and then we have client approval, and sometimes they have a compliance approval as well. And this can really, really kill the entire process, right? It kills creativity for me, for sure. And it can really slow down your process. And I try to get everybody through this entire process from brief to launch within less than 7 days on a repeat basis, right? And sometimes for some brands, we get it down to 2 or 3 days. We measure this and we measure how many days it takes at each step. For some brands, it's more like 2 weeks, because they're just the turnaround time on approvals is too slow. And I can tell you now, there's a direct correlation between the brands that are successful and the speed at which they approve. And if they're telling me that they're only going to approve creatives once a week, I literally don't want to work with them. You've got to approve things twice a week, 3 times a week, ideally every single day. And that pace is what actually generates that momentum in the system, which gets that learnings to come back in and then allows you to scale. Sorry to the people who only approve once a week, but yeah, I prefer if you approve every day. Launching. So next step is just getting it into the ad account, and you want to make sure there's some naming convention which helps you to identify what you've launched, because when you start doing thousands of ads and they're all in your ad account, it gets super confusing, right? You don't even know what's going on half the time. So unless you have a strict naming convention that you follow, and we have a software that we built ourselves that does the naming for us, then you literally don't know what you're looking at when you're doing your analysis. And the final piece is concluding. So what ads worked and what ads didn't work, and try to unpick why. And that's where our human brain comes in, right? I think that AI does a not so good job. Is just that critical thinking about okay, why did this particular ad work and why didn't that ad work, right? And really think that through, conversate it with people, right? And talking to AI is fine. Who here talks to AI? Everybody, right? Who here talks with voice? Okay. Who here prefers to talk with text? Okay, it depends what mood I'm in. Sometimes if I'm in the car, I'll talk with voice. I think this is one thing where it falls down. When you talk to AI, it just puts you in a confirmation bias loop, in my opinion, right? So it just tells you what you already said back to it, right? And if you say, hey, give me the opposite opinion, it just gives you the opposite opinion. At least I'm talking about ChatGPT here, right? And I even put in my settings, please be opinionated, give me an opinion, don't just say what I said. And it doesn't listen to me, it just does what it wants to do, right? But anyway, so I think doing the conclusion yourself and analyzing the creative and looking at it and really, really studying, and honestly, studying that first 2 seconds that Ian was talking about is really important. And watch it again and again and again and again. Right? Watch it 100 times, right? Why did this hook work and why did that hook not work? And I think the amount of times, who here sits and watches ads on a weekly basis, right? Okay, who here studies the hooks and watches them again and again and again? Okay, there's some people in the room who are doing that. I think it's the most important thing to do, because you need to be okay, did this connect with me? And the way that I think about it is, When you've got an ad, you're basically selling to a person. You have to imagine that person in front of you. I think of marketing more like sales. Okay, if I was selling to this person, they were in the room, would my message actually resonate with them to get them to take an action? Would they do something with the thing that I'm showing them? And I watched that 2 seconds again and again, and I tried to imagine the person who's my customer avatar sat in front of me. I'm like, okay, will this person truly be convinced by the thing that I've just showed to them? And if the answer is no, that was mediocre, just start again, do it again, right? And that's where some of our iterative work comes in, because we're trying to improve existing ads. So that's our workflow. And by the way, I'm going to take some questions at the end. So if anyone wants to ask any specifics about this, I'm happy to unpack some things. Christian, who's run away somewhere, but he's going to be talking about Gen AI production. So he's more focused around that. So I'm not going to touch too much on that myself, but he's going to talk about that in a bit. I think I've covered this already. So problem for me is it takes too long to get ads briefed, produced, approved, launched. Right, I'm very impatient. Right, as a founder, I just want to get things done yesterday. I'm always messaging everyone on Slack and saying why isn't this done? There's a mistake here. Can we do this? Can we do it faster? I think the second problem for me is it's project management gets in the way of creativity, and often people don't know how much creative they're producing and how fast it's coming back around, right? It just gets lost in email chains or Slack communication, and we just end up in a general slowdown, and nobody ever sits and unpicks the process to understand why did it actually slow down. And then we actually built our own internal software, so I'll give a bit of a plug for that. We haven't publicly launched it yet, but if anybody wants to find out about it, just drop me a DM on LinkedIn. So we actually measure there's 4 general stages within that process that I mentioned: brief, production, approval, and launch. And we measure how long things were at each stage in that process. And like I mentioned before, we're trying to compress that down from ideally down to 2 or 3 days in the most ideal situation. We run in sprints. So who here uses agile methodology in some? Okay. So we run in either 1 week or 2 week sprints, which means we do some planning where we have an ad plan and we bring our ideas to the table. It then gets approved, and then we go and produce that over the course of a week or 2 weeks, depending on which team it is. And then we launch the ads at the end of that week or 2 weeks, and then we see how it went, and we go back around in a circle again. So we go through this iterative testing process every single week, or every 2 weeks, and I think that's really important. You don't want to apply a waterfall approach to this. I think the brands that do big campaigns twice a year, build a bunch of assets, it just doesn't work in 2025, honestly. I think campaigns do work for seasonal sales. If you're promoting a new product, a new offer, if you've got a specific discount at a certain time of the year, amazing, do that. But for your continuous ad production, you should be doing something every week, every other week, and you should have a fast pace of production. I think it's really important. But then when you have a plan, famous quote from Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? It's so true. We can have this perfect plan. We can write all these presentations and say, hey, we did this perfect sprint plan and look at my project management. It's amazing. But the truth is, you have to be somewhat reactive to what's working and what's not working. And I did a bit of an analysis with one of the teams, and I got a sample of 1,800 ads that we'd made. And we actually broke down how much of that went into planned work and unplanned work, right? And I actually realized, the reason I did this exercise is I was concerned that some of the planned work that we had agreed to do together, we weren't getting done. And I was like, what's happening here? Are we just slow? Are we not doing this properly? And I realized that what's happening is people were deprioritizing planned work in favor of unplanned work because the unplanned work was based around concepts that were working now. So people were seeing ads that were working and iterating on them the same week. And I think you have to have this balance. It's a bit of 80-20, or in this case, 60-30, 60-40, of making things, having a bit of a plan, but also being reactive to what's working. I think that's really, really important. And then how do you make the whole process go faster? So this is our general team structure, and I think every company could replicate somewhat of a structure like this. So we have a growth team in the middle, and they're the ones who come up with the strategy. So typically we'll have the media buyer and the creative strategist sat within that team. And I like to get them literally sitting next to each other in the office physically, debating with each other all day long. It's quite funny because growth strategists or media buyers are generally speaking data people, kind of from a STEM degree, maybe maths, maybe engineering, something like that. And then you have your creative strategists who come from a video editing background, designer background, copywriting. They're very much like creatives, right? And I think that friction point between those two different groups of people is a very healthy thing, and it's what actually drives brands forward. Because you'll have the data people saying, hey, this ad works, that one doesn't work. And they're very objective in the way that they make decisions, but they miss the humanness sometimes, right? And I think creatives, what they do is they talk from a subjective opinion. I think, I feel, I believe. And the media buyers can't handle this, right? But the media buyers have a very strong voice with your CFOs and the budget controllers, because they can very quickly say, hey, this ad made this much revenue, right? Do more of this ad. But in the real world, we know that it doesn't really work like that. And that friction point is important to understand. And I think this is where, as leaders within your companies, I think if you instill this, if you enable this friction point to happen from top down, so it's got to happen from CEO level, C level downwards. I think if there's that understanding that the entire decision should not be made by the person who just knows the performance data, there should be some decision making from the creative. I think that is what enables things to scale really well in e-com. So strategy happens in the team in the middle. We then get assets from production team and from content creators. I'd probably add a third circle in there now, which is like generative AI, stuff we're producing with AI. And then the growth team, basically the creative strategist, sends briefs into the post-production team saying, hey, I want to use these assets. Here's my idea. And then assets come back in to the growth team. They then launch them into the ad account. And then we get data back in through a data process, have a small data team. And the whole process kind of goes in this loop, and that's happening on a continuous weekly by weekly basis. And if anybody has a team and want to talk about team structure, just ask me in the Q&As after, like how you can implement this within, because I've been thinking about this problem for like almost daily for the last 4 years. So how do I, this is also just from our internal software. So how do we track things like what is the most important metrics? So people have to have some metrics to track, right? And I like to break things down into inputs and outputs. Like some people call them lead indicators, some people call them lag indicators, right? And I think the most important thing is always the output, which is, did the ad or did the campaign drive revenue? Did it actually hit top line or bottom line, growth goals for the business? And but I think that you can't look at that in isolation, because there's a lag between the time you put the input in and the performance coming through in the account. So it's also important to look at the inputs. So for me, looking at the volume of production, the volume of creative that we're producing on a weekly basis is really important. So in these charts, I'm looking at, weekly and daily launches of ads, and breaking it down as to like, where's the slowdown? Where in this process did we not launch enough ads, right? And how do we improve this process? One is, how do we make it go faster? One is reduce revision rates. That friction between the person writing the brief and executing the brief. It can be solved by having really clear briefs, better communication between briefers and design teams or editing teams. And I think this is key because you don't want there to be too much friction backwards and forwards with like little niggly revisions, because it just kills the creativity in the process and everybody feels the friction and doesn't want to do the work, right? And they just get super annoyed. You want to allow some creativity to happen, right? So try and make briefs clear. I think there's two types of ways of briefing, in my opinion, though. If you're dealing with let's say a video editor who's maybe a junior video editor, or maybe the briefer's got a very specific idea in their mind, you've got to lay out the scenes very specifically. Like, hey, I want this clip, I want this copy, I want this clip, I want this copy. The other way is you give a lot more freedom to the editor, and you say, hey, here's a general concept, here's what's worked, can you go and make something from it? And I think you've got to think about who you're briefing to know how to actually write the brief in the first place. So I think selection of how you write the brief will determine how to make the brief clear, and I think the clarity of the brief is what actually improves this process. A few other things that we have some designers and editors in different countries, so language can be an issue. Compliance around wording and branding can definitely slow things down as well. Some of the team who are actually at the back over there as well. So I try to make data very visible on performance. I try to install this performance mindset into people. And we have, like, on a monthly basis, we have 4 tiers of targets that are going to get announced every single month, and it's like a revenue-based target. Did you hit this much revenue, this much, this much, this much? And people get paid a bonus based on literally a direct bonus at the end of every month if they hit certain tiers of revenue for the business, right? So this aligns the growth team who thinks of the strategy to the actual end output, right? So there's an immediate financial reward. And the way I think about it is, like, us as a business, we get paid on performance. So I want to make sure the team is equally incentivized on performance. And I know it's a bit harder in a large company to do this, but when you have small pockets of teams, if you're able to really segment that performance bonus into like a structure where that works, it can be extremely powerful. So yeah, we're watching these data points every single day, and the key things we track, which I've mentioned a couple of already, is how much are we spending, how much revenue are we getting back, what's the ROAS, typical things. We're tracking last 7 days, month to date, projected as well. So we're looking at, based on the run rate, how much are we going to hit by the end of the month? And the inputs are pretty simply like the number of ads launched and the number of landing pages we've launched to kind of sit with them as well. So question for the room. I think I've already answered this to myself, to be honest with you, but who's using AI today? I think it's pretty much everybody. Okay. Who's using something that isn't ChatGPT? Okay, still a lot of people. Who's generating videos and images in their work every single week? Okay, less people, but still quite a lot. Okay, cool. I'm definitely going to be talking to a few people after about this because that's interesting to me. So back to the process. How do we think about how to implement AI within this process? So as I mentioned, I don't think there's any good tools that run from A to Z and get everything done for you in a way which is like perfect, right? There are a few concepts where it can work, but for the most case, you've still got to have a lot of human input. So I try to think about which parts in this process can I apply AI to actually remove the tedious parts of work that we just don't like doing, right? So I mentioned that I don't like writing briefs, right? That sucks. We don't like finding assets. Like finding assets when you've got a G drive full of like 10,000 videos is just a pain, right? Like how are you going to go and find assets? Describing layouts, I'm not very good at drawing, so I think describing layouts is one thing that I try to automate. And gathering brand info and keeping that consolidated in one place and up to date, that can be a pain. So I try to think about where can I speed up the process using AI in all these steps. And I think before I start kind of unpacking some of the tools that I use, I just want to briefly mention like where is this going? Like where do I see this going? Basically, AI means that the production cost is going down. So the cost of making ads is going down and we're going to be able to do it quicker. So we're definitely on a path towards unlimited ad production. Every single person in this room will be able to produce unlimited ads within this year for sure. The cost is just coming down and down and down. The tools are getting better and better and better, right? So if naturally everybody's got an unlimited quantity of ads, it means we really have to focus on quality, right? And conversion rate. And for me, the kind of key thing that sets us apart as humans is this is going to sound a bit more like philosophical, is there's a certain humanness which, there's a certain human taste which becomes of greater value when all the project management is handled by AI, right? Because project management stuff doesn't add real world value, it just gets the job done, right? It's that human creativity which actually unlocks the next step of growth for brands, right? So some of the best campaigns that you've seen in the world have had that human element of like creativity applied, and you can see it coming out and you're like, oh, this person like really understood what they were doing and it like just bangs, right? And you just like, oh, I remember that, it sticks in my mind. So I think what will naturally happen is if we remove all the tedious work, remove all the project management elements, and we just really focus on what makes us human, I think human taste is going to become the new most valuable thing in the world. And I think that each person's human taste will become more and more unlocked. And I do also think that job titles that exist now won't exist in 12 months or 24 months. And I think the companies who try to stick to the structures that exist right now are going to struggle. And I think that everybody has to become a creative in some way. So if you've got a team that's producing ads, every single person should be making ads, right? Every single person. So let me kind of unpack a couple of the steps in our process then. So with the research, where we start from, one thing I'll say is AI is very good at collating information. So it's good at like gathering reviews and putting them in a spreadsheet and helping you do a sentiment on each one. But I'd say like one thing it's bad at is aggregating sentiment. So once you get a bunch of reviews, let's say, and you try to say, hey, what's the average sentiment of what's going on? The way I call it, it flattens the emotional data. It takes out all the extremities of what people are saying, and it just gives you the bit in the middle, right? And you end up with this sludge, which is just like not that useful, right? So I think that you should use AI to collect information and to make your life easier in terms of moving information from here to here. That's like the number one use case for me is like moving information. But I don't think you should flatten emotional data. I think as humans, we can connect with other humans in ways that AI just can't do. And some of the things that we do, so we built, who's using NA10 here? Who's heard of NA10? Okay. So just for context for people who don't know what that is. So it's like a workflow builder where you have multiple steps where you have like if this, then that. So if I take this step, then do this and decide this particular software, then do that in that software. And at the end, there's a result or an output, right? So we built different workflows, and some of these nodes within this process can be powered by AI and different models. One we actually built was collating Trustpilot reviews. And remember I mentioned don't take the average sentiment because that's like pretty boring to read. But it does put them all into a spreadsheet and it rates them in terms of categories, which means you can then filter by categories and you can find the most positive and the least positive, right? And you can lean into them and bring up that messaging in your advertising, right? A tool that I like, which is pretty cool. I mean, I think there's so much depth of information on Reddit. The main reason is people say things on Reddit that they just wouldn't admit to saying to people in real life, right? This is the truth. Everyone's anonymous on there, so you can, be a freedom fighter or whatever you want to be on Reddit. So people do talk about the depths of their pain points, which leads them to buying a product, right? And I find that especially within health and beauty specifically, which is, two of the verticals we spend a lot of time in. So there's a real depth of context within Reddit that you should be reading and analyzing, as advertisers and marketers. Now, one thing that's interesting to me is I know that, I think I read a stat someone posted on LinkedIn that ChatGPT is now referencing, of the citations it makes, it went from referencing 1% from Reddit to 5% from Reddit within the course of 2 months. And that was like a couple of months ago. So what's basically happening is ChatGPT is using more data from Reddit, and it's becoming more powerful because of that, right? And you can see that in their annual reports of how many fees they pay back to Reddit, right? So that's kind of the evidence that people have gathered. This tool is interesting for me. It's called, I'm not affiliated, by the way, so I don't get any commission or anything like that. It's called Gummy Search. So it enables you just to search different subreddits, find subreddits, and raise things up to your attention, when they're topical. And I think there's just so much depth of information in here. And I think the real power of AI doesn't become about, do I use ChatGPT or do I use a different tool, right? It's more about the context that you give it and the unique training data that you give it. And for me, like Reddit is one of the most rich sources of training data that you can imagine, because it's your customers talking, right? So you should pay attention to your customers. If you're not meeting them, talking to them, speaking to them, you should definitely be reading what they're writing, right? Another thing we built was a ad library scraper. So we go on Facebook ad library and we basically look at our competitors and we look at their images and videos, and we analyze using Gemini what's going on in that particular video image, right? So we try to determine, of the ads that are running the longest, which we're going to presume are the ones that are highest performing, not always the case, but often is, and what's actually going on in those. We get the transcript and then we try to analyze the transcript from the audio, like what's being said, what are the key pain points, and it's a pretty useful tool for us. Production, so Christian's going to talk more about generative AI and AI UGC, and I think we've got somebody on the panel as well from a software company that does that. So I'm not going to go into too much depth on that. But one thing I will say is that how I mentioned about you want to get into the headspace and mind space of your customer, your best content creators are your customers, right? Or you can speak to a content creator and turn them into a customer, a raving fan. So what we do is we literally pick up a call. We literally video call the content creators. We're like, okay, we're going to send you some products, actually experience this product for a couple of weeks. We're going to call you back and tell us what you thought and felt about this product, right? It's very different to the generic seeding campaigns where people just send product and be like, send us content back, right? That kind of content just comes back pretty crap, to be honest. What you want to do is really get to know the person, like what makes them tick, what's going on in their life, how does this product fit into their life, right? Really spend the time to ask those open-ended questions. You kind of want to be an investigative journalist, right? You want to find out as much information as you can about their life. And you'll tend to find that people generally nowadays are a bit lonely, right? And meeting new people who are interested in their life. People open up so quickly. It's insane how much people will reveal in a first call all about their life. They'll just tell you their entire life story. I've had so many we've had people crying on the video calls and all kinds of stuff, right? So what we do now is, when I mentioned about training data being the new thing that's the most important thing, the most valuable thing, right? One of the most valuable things. We get the transcripts from the video calls and we put that into ChatGPT and we use that to actually make scripts, which we then send back to the person, the content creator. And we're like, okay, you said something like this. Can you talk about it on camera? And a little cheeky thing we actually do as well, we record the video calls, but we don't tell them we're recording them until the end. I don't know if that's legal or not. Probably shouldn't say that. But at the end of the call, we ask their permission. We're like, okay, we recorded the call. If you tell them at the beginning, they're going to be guarded. They're going to be like, what should I say? I need to be careful. I'm being recorded. At the end of the call, we say, hey, can we pay you a fee just to use some of that content that we took in the video call itself? And we just chop that up and put it in ads, right? And then you get some of the most compelling messaging and most heartfelt stories doing things that way. So I think that what I'm saying is we're enabling human connection by actually speaking to people. Like, why are people so afraid to talk to people? Just pick up the phone to the people who are your customers. So I remember speaking last week to a brand owner. He actually sells. So cannabis has been legalized in the US, right? And he's a founder from a company, the largest company that sells cannabis in the US online, and they're doing over 100 million in revenue. And he said, for the first few months of running the business, he spoke to every single customer. So every single sale that came in, he picked up the phone. He's like, why did you buy the product? Like, why did you choose us? What was the reason? And he really got to understand what worked. And that's the reason why he scaled, because he just got so in tune with the customer. He knew exactly what made them tick, right? And if you can't do that yourself because you're not in a position to do so, your content creators are also your customers. Like, get them to go and speak to other people, get them to find out and bring the information to you, right? But yeah, so where are we going with all this Gen AI stuff? I've got a few minutes left. I think that the question I get asked is, will content creators be replaced, right? Who's a content creator here? Okay. Are you worried about getting replaced? There's a few people are worried about getting replaced. I think that the top 1% of creators who have good taste won't get replaced. And I say that very specifically because I want you all to be in the top 1%, right? And not to fall down. I think that there's going to be a vast majority of people in the middle who are just going to get, their content's not very interesting. They're going to get replaced by AI stuff, which is just more compelling, right? So you want to elevate that humanness. You want to get better at making content. And I can tell you now, we had a brand that we worked with. We tested over 100 content creators for that particular brand, right? And I can tell you, only 5 of them really performed on advertising. And of the 5 that performed, 1 of them really stood out, and we kept working with them again and again and again. So from 100 plus creators that we tested, and that's why I come up with the 1% figure, she produced multi 8 figures in revenue from ads that she was making for us. And we thought, okay, hang on, we need to diversify. We need to get more people. We need like more diverse creative. But it just kept working, so we kept doing it, right? And that's the truth. And we incentivized her, so rather than saying, hey, here's like 300 quid a brief or 500 pound a brief, just send us some content back. We gave her a percentage. We just said, okay, of the advertising spend that we're spending, here's 1%, right? Which ended up mounting to quite a bit of money for her. She did 200K in commission in 12 months. Just as a content creator, not as an influencer. She didn't have a following or anything like that, just literally making content. And I think that story just tells me that the top tier of creators, you want to keep them close to your business, right? That's going to be really important. I thought I'd give a shout out to my friend over there. So I'm thinking about automating as many of these processes as possible. And this is a tool we just onboarded with recently. It's Yash from Soral. You can go find him afterwards. But he made a tool which enables you to do seeding at scale. So who sends products to content creators on a weekly basis? Not that many, okay. You should definitely be sending products out to if you've got physical product, send it out to your content creators, get them to post content about it. And this automates or kind of helps you to automate the process of it. The reason I bring it up now is there's a new AI feature that they released, which basically enables you to draft all the messages and then the human approves. And I think that's the way where there's going to be a difference in like how we do things going forward. It's going to be like an AI brings you the first bit and then the human just slam dunks it, right? And I think that's like what's going to continue to happen. You're going to see more tech emerging around this. I mentioned about finding raw assets as being a pain. So there's definitely tools out there. This is one we're testing at the moment, which basically categorizes using computer vision. So it analyzes what's going on in the image and the video. It's called Build Your Ads. If anybody's interested in testing it, I can intro you guys to the founder. And it categorizes into like what product is being displayed, what is a person talking about, and it just enables you to go and find the clips much easier. Again, it's compressing that time to writing the brief. And who was at MadFest last week? Or a few people. So it's an exhibition on marketing in, I think, where was it? Somewhere nice in London. In the brewery. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not from London, somewhere bougie. Shoreditch, yeah, that's it. All the cool people are. So a lot of the AI tools that I saw presenting at MadFest were talking about pre-testing, right? So this is where a brand's got, 5 million to spend in a year, and they're worried about spending it, so they'll come and do some pre-testing. And what a lot of software companies were promoting was use eye tracking data and heat maps to understand how a person is going to resonate. But in the end, it's just an AI actually telling you with this data, is that ad going to work or not going to work? And I saw so many of these different tools in different wrappers at this event, and it tells me that's like the most trending thing. So I'm sure most of you will get pitched by these kind of tools in the next 12 months for sure, if you haven't already been, right? For me, I don't really believe in that. I'm going to give a contrary view to that. I think that Meta is one of the most, I'm not just saying that because they allowed me to speak here, but Meta's got the most powerful algorithm in the entire world. We ran ads on LinkedIn and we ran ads on Meta for this event, and Meta outperformed like 90% of the spend went there. And when we've done things multi-channel in the past, even TikTok, Meta always outperforms. I think Meta is just so tuned into knowing what resonates with a customer that you don't need to do any of this pre-testing. And I think you've got to get away from the mindset of like, oh, I've got a zillion pounds to spend. I'm going to spend it here, here, and here. Just let the algorithm do the spending for you. Let it make the decisions on what's actually resonating based on the goals that you have for your business. I think for me, I'm not really into these pre-testing tools, and I'm more into just trusting the algorithm that's been built over many years of you guys interacting with your phone to just make the right decisions. So, and then tagging of creative. So similar to the raw asset tagging, I know now that we're automatically generating our tags for our creative using our software, but I can see a lot more AI tools now doing the tagging of the creative itself. Analysis, I didn't actually have a screenshot of this because we're building this with Motion. Motion app is a creative reporting tool that makes creative reporting super easy for creative teams. Who's used Motion app? Who's used it? A few people, okay. I think it's bigger in the US than it is in the UK. But they've made a pivot in their business, which is quite interesting. They raised $30 million very recently, and they made a decision to actually switch away from creative reporting more towards allowing people to build their own reporting tools using the data that's being pulled from Facebook, Google, Shopify, etc. So I'm actually building a workflow within there which creates a report based on the data, and it also analyzes what's going on in the images and videos, gets the data, and tries to kind of come up with some meaning behind what's working. It's early days with these kind of tools. Anybody who's making claims that they've got the magic bullet, trust me, nobody's got the magic bullet. But it's definitely iteratively improving every single month. Before we go on to generative AI, which Christian's going to cover, everyone knows big shoots are expensive and slow and a pain to actually execute. You have this idea in your mind, and by the time you come to actually doing it, you're just so far in and so much effort. And Gen AI, just to really hammer the point home, execution is nearly free and it's accessible to everybody. Right? This is really important. And if you think it's not already being done, all the big brands are already doing this. These are old screenshots. So since this, many other brands have jumped on. Nike, Mango. I've seen some brands actually now completely do their entire product photography completely with Gen AI. Puma are doing it. They made an AI influencer a while ago. Audi, BMW, they're all on the case, right? And so where do I think we're all going to end up with this? I think there's a risk that people will decrease their critical thinking. I think this is the most problematic thing with AI, right? The number one most problematic thing. And if you're getting confirmation bias from ChatGPT and it's making you feel good, just put it down and go and talk to a human, please. Like somebody else in the office who's going to give you a contrary point of view. And if everyone's going to have access to making unlimited ads, your ads have got to be the best, right? And back to that original point I made, which is human beings, we've always continued to create things through history, right? It's the reason we come up with monuments and all these wacky things that should never have been built. They don't make any sense, but we continue to build them. So as things become standardized, homogenized, everything looks the same, things that really stand out because of the human creativity aspect will always outperform. They'll always outperform. And this will continue to get more and more amplified. And this is a funny video that I saw. Has anybody heard of the Door Brothers? Wacky video, this one. So controversial. Watch this video if anybody wants to watch it when they get home. It's actually super entertaining just from a visual point of view, right? It's very like a political satire, like just ridiculous visuals, right? But for me, like I was engaged. The whole thing is AI generated, right? And it's just a bunch of different characters from world leaders and business people. They've just made into caricatures and done like wacky things with, right? And I was captivated. Turn the music up as well. Like it's very visceral if you like. Turn the music up as well with big bass. But like, yeah, I just had to watch this a few times over because like it was like a Travis Scott video, but on steroids. That's how I've described it. Anyone who's watched any Travis Scott videos. And this tells me that AI, well, I guess what I'm getting to here is AI has the power to stir human emotion. And I've definitely watched things and consumed things where I've been like, okay, even though this was made with AI, a human being still controlled it, and I was still moved by this. So that's my key point here, because I think that's going to come into advertising. So don't think that AI will just make some sludge that doesn't work. There's stuff that definitely will work. And the point for me is go and watch that Door Brothers video, and you'll see, or watch some of their videos that they've made, you'll see. So my prediction where we're going to end up is Tinder for ads, swipe right or swipe left with feedback. I think what I'm basically saying here is the process of putting human input into the process of making ads is just going to get easier and easier, right? And Tinder's like swipe right, swipe left. But I imagine there's going to be more like swipe right, okay, why do you like this ad? Swipe left, oh no, I don't like this ad because, and that's going to iterate into the next ad production round. So I think what happens is those tools are going to emerge, and I've already seen the early signs of something's emerging, and we're also working on something like this. And I think human taste and creative novelty gets reflected in refining these outputs. And this training data of taste just gets compounded. So imagine every time you're giving some feedback, that taste is getting compounded, and certain people will have better taste, more appealing taste than other people, right? Because they just understand people better than others. underneath all this, you just got to get to understand people better than anybody else. And that's never changed, and it never will change from day one to whenever the world ends. That's always going to be the case, and advertisers and marketers will always have a place because of that. And how do you go back and actually implement this into your team? So final point for me, really, you've got to get people into the mindset that this is important. They've got to know that their job could get replaced, and they've got to make sure that they're attacking their own personal growth, and they're learning about the different AI tools, and they're bringing them to the table. And a good point that somebody made to me the other day was, generally speaking, so I'm like 39 years old, right? So I'm like pre-internet and post-internet. I think there's a generation now which is like pre-AI and post-AI, which is going to be interesting. And I've got a son now, and he's 18 months old, and I imagine now he's just like post-AI, right? He's not going to know the difference. And I kind of think about the world in the next 5, 10, 15 years, and I just can't even imagine it, right? I don't like to call it Generation A or Generation B. I like to call it the Roblox generation, because like so many kids are playing Roblox nowadays and making millions. I actually want to speak to some people who are making Roblox games and making millions, because I don't really understand it. But that whole generation is going to get older, and we need to think about how are we going to sell to them. And the point that was made to me the other day is people who are older, generally speaking, control capital in businesses. They're the ones who make the decisions. They're the ones who move projects from here to there, or decide project A versus project B. It's generally speaking the younger people who are actually adopting the AI tools the fastest and just moving the quickest with technology, because they've been born with it. They're post-AI, the post-AI people. And it's really important that your senior leaders in the company are listening to what's happening on the ground. And I think that's where the most value is going to get unlocked, when people at the top are listening to people on the ground. And if that's not happening, it's going to be problematic. And I think this is how you protect careers and how you actually keep jobs for the long term, is by embracing this like communication between capital allocation and innovation, right? So for me, how do I implement this every single day in what we do? If somebody comes to me and says, I always say to everybody in the team, I'm like, if you've got an AI tool you want to test, don't go to anybody else, come directly to me. I want to see what the tool is, how much it costs, and I'll approve it. And I can tell you now, pretty much every single day, every time I've had a request, within 24 hours, I've approved it, right? Because I want to see what people are doing and what they're building. As a result, we have a lot of software in the company. We have like 80 plus different softwares that we're continuously testing, and I have to kill them every now and then because some things are being used and some things are not. But it is important to do proper testing. And how do we actually incentivize this internally? We run little competitions. We have internal coins that we distribute between each other. There's like an app on Slack that you can use, which is really cool. I can show anybody afterwards if they want to see it. And we just set bounties. So I set a bounty the other day of like 500 coins, which equates to, it's nothing major. It's like maybe £40. A bounty of like, okay, anybody who can build an NA10 workflow using AI and implement it into somebody else's work, not your own, and can show it to me, I'll give them the bounty, right? And I set 3 bounties, and that was just an example. Every week we have a new challenge for post-production tools, which Christian's going to talk about in a second, where we're just testing a new tool every single week, and there's always a regular bounty for that, right? I guess what I'm saying is incentivize good behavior around AI adoption, and make sure people at the top are listening to people at the bottom, and really pushing this agenda top down, because it definitely won't come bottom up. And that's pretty much me. Thank you. Yeah. And just a final point, I'll be hanging around outside. Christian is now going to talk about generative AI tools. If anyone wants to grab me, just drop me if they can't grab me outside, just drop me a message on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. Yeah, thank you again.